Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm proved once again the value of superior air power. A major component of the air war was the use of helicopters. No other airframe manufacturer, helicopter or fixed wing, fielded as many aircraft as Bell in support of the war effort. The bulk of the helicopters employed by the U.S. Army during Desert Shield and Desert Storm were Bells. This included OH-58As and Cs, UH-1H and V model Hueys, and AH-1E and F model Cobras. Now, many of these aircraft saw combat action in Vietnam some 20 years ago, again proving the reliability and toughness of Bell products. For high-tech, state-of-the-art lethality, there was nothing to compare to the 115 OH-58Ds deployed in Desert Storm. No stranger to this arena, ship-based RMD models have been patrolling the troubled waters of the Gulf for nearly 3 years prior to Desert Storm.
We were one of the first ones up there. We were prepared, and we flew in support of the embassy takeover, or the reoccupation, I guess is a better way to phrase it, of the American and British embassies. And again, we were called on because we do have unique capabilities that no one in the Army, the Air Force, the Marines, or the Navy possess. And that is, again, our long-range night system and our ability to deliver precision weapons.
Based aboard 2 U.S. Navy frigates, armed OH-58D Kiowa Warriors from the 4th of the 17th were responsible for taking out an Iraqi Silkworm missile site that had the entire Allied naval fleet pinned down.
The Silkworm missile site was located on Philika Island, and this site was causing great concern with the Navy because the naval forces wouldn't move any farther north until they knew that site was inactive. The naval fast movers off the carriers had been trying for roughly 48 hours to destroy this site, and with no avail. They'd hit around it and they'd knocked out some of the other units on the island, but they couldn't hit it. So one mission we were going to do a coastal recon, and received an in-flight mission change. And the mission was to fly up to Philika and, if possible, take out the Silkworm missile site. Once on station, we made 3 passes, roughly 20 minutes. The first missile went ballistic. It didn't score a direct hit on the missile site, but it did take out a ammo bunker. The second or the third final pass, we scored a direct hit on the Silkworm missile site. This, in talking with the naval commanders, allowed the naval forces, to include the amphibious assault force and the battleships, freedom of access through the northern Arabian Gulf. Also allowed them to support the ground war by allowing us to get within 12 miles of the Kuwaiti coast and allow the battleships to support the ground operations, and the assault force to do the feint on Philika Island and to the coast.
The reputation of the OH-58D as an aircraft not to be tangled with had spread throughout the region, thus ensuring the capture of Kura Island, one of the first victories of the war.
Basically, it was the aircraft that was the one that took the island down, because when we asked some of the prisoners, why'd you give up so easily? You know, you didn't fire a shot upon any of our aircraft. And, you know, basically there was 29 of you and just 2 aircraft. You had RPGs and a full array of anti-aircraft weapon systems. And they said basically that we just looked too threatening. The aircraft looked too ominous. They looked like they were overpowered.
Maintained by soldiers, the OH-58Ds enjoyed the highest fully mission-capable rates of any Army helicopter in the war. The gallantry displayed by Marine Corps aviators throughout Desert Shield and Desert Storm will be a source of pride for years to come. The Marine Corps deployed over 100 Bell helicopters to the Gulf, including some 24 1968 AH-1Js with the Marine Reserve. The Js carried rockets and guns and were used in an escort role and for fire suppression. Most of the J-model Cobras were Vietnam veterans, again attesting to the ruggedness and long-term reliability of Bell products. Late model AH-1W Whiskey Cobras paired with Marine UH-1N Model 212 twin-engine Hueys made for a powerful and lethal combination.
Marine Cobras had a big part in this war and were airborne and fighting from absolutely the first minute the war started on the 17th of January the moment the last shot was fired as a ceasefire was called. You know, we were so successful and we had so few losses that everybody thinks that, gee, it must have been a vanilla. We just rolled right over them and there was no resistance or anything else, but it wasn't exactly that way all the time. There was some periods of fairly intense combat, and if we hadn't had the ability to score first round hits, I think we would have been in a lot worse shape. And our ability to do that, I think, overwhelmed those guys. I don't think that they could believe we operated under the conditions that we did, and I think they felt intimidated or helpless by the fact that when we showed up, they knew they were gonna lose.
Time and again, Marine pilots demonstrated that their flying skills, combined with the Cobra's lethality, made for a formidable punch.
We were rolling in on a Iraqi observation post, and the forward air controllers identified the target to us, and so we set up for attack run. I told my wingman how we were going to do it over the radio, and we start rolling in, start shooting, and we didn't know it, but they had a tank dug in right next to it. And so we're flying along, next thing I know, I see this flash, and this tank round just as it throws right by our cockpit. You know, I go, hey, look at that, you know, they were shooting at us, and we just kept on going in. Went ahead and used tow on it because they couldn't tow in 20 millimeter in rockets because they couldn't laze from as far back as the FAC was. And pulled off, came back around, attacked him again.
Marine infantry commanders are lavish in their praise of the Cobras. The first major battle of the war at the town of Khafji was a prime example.
At one point during that fight, I witnessed a Cobra hovering to acquire the target, and an artillery round went off right underneath it to the effect that it shuttered the aircraft, but the aircraft stayed in flight and kept firing. And they attacked the batteries and a Chinese Type 59 tank, which was hidden between two buildings that was shooting into my position, and didn't destroy him, but they caused him to move. It was a very difficult shot and a very gutsy move on the part of a couple of pilots. We traded licks with the enemy for about 17 days. My preferred weapon at that time was a Whiskey Cobra with the C-squared element aboard the November model Huey. They were responsive, they were always on time, and very, very aggressive in their behavior.
We attacked everything from observations posts to dug-in infantry to tanks to armored personnel carriers, multiple rocket launchers, AAA sites, any point target that was within our capabilities of engaging. At some point in time during the war, we engaged it. And I got to say that certainly wasn't just my squadron. My sister squadron, 367, also played a large role in our success. I think that the final tally was about 100 tanks, 40-some armored personnel carriers, number of observation posts, about a dozen multiple rocket launchers, numerous trucks and vehicles, and several AAA sites. So all in all, about 200 targets, and then of course we had an interesting engagement on the second day of the war where we had an entire Iraqi tank battalion surrender to 3 Cobras and one Huey, which was kind of an interesting evolution.
As the Marines moved into position to liberate Kuwait, the fighting became increasingly tougher. Smoke from hundreds of burning oil wells blackened the skies. Whiskey Cobras, flying tandem with a UH-1N equipped with a commercially purchased FLIR, flew into the thick where no other American gunship would venture.
Through the evening, the weather deteriorated, and the smoke from the oil fires, which is pretty well known worldwide now, the catastrophe that occurred there. Well, that had affected our immediate battlefield. Ceilings were very low, and the next morning we did absorb a counterattack, and we know it was at least 2 brigades, possibly a third of all the division forces. Mainly the attack came from the east. And early that morning, as we, I know I personally experienced an exciting morning because the counterattack hit at the division forward CP. Within 200 meters we had armored vehicles and tanks. And before the day was over, there were 35 destroyed around that immediate vicinity. Those are APCs or BTR-60s type vehicles and 4 or 5 tanks. What helped that battle was the Cobras came in from, I think, 367 and 369, the squadrons that supported us, were able to fly underneath that cloud cover and get in, and because of that teamwork, we knew each other. The fight took place, there were Hellfires being launched from directly over our CP at about maybe 50 to 100 meters above our CP, destroying enemy armored vehicles within 300 meters of our CP. And of course, I contribute quite a bit to the Cobra community for me being able to stand here today, and I know several of us on the ground do that as well.
The Whiskey Cobra was maintained in the field entirely by U.S. Marines, not the factory personnel required to maintain other U.S. gunships. Nonetheless, the Cobras enjoyed superior FMC rates and were used throughout Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm, not just during the 100-hour surge. And when the Marine infantry needed them, the Cobras were ready.